Okay, we're good to go now. Good morning and welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, September 21st. We are meeting on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ministerial Order M192, the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. The meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. The meeting is open to the public for electronic participation via WebEx and limited in-person participation in council chambers to observe the council meeting. Someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, this morning we are starting off with our budget kickoff information package. And so I'm going to turn things over to the finance team. Ms. Blender.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I'd like to jump in, if I might, and introduce today's presentation by the finance team. So thank you, members of council and the community that are tuning in. We're excited to launch our financial planning process today. Today is less about the numbers and more about our actual process. And we wanted to provide council and the community with a really robust introduction to the process that we're using this year for our 5-year financial planning and also our public engagement for this process. The finance team and the management team have done a very good job of working on how to improve our budget processing, our financial planning, as well as a robust public engagement. And with that, I will pass it back over to our Chief Financial Officer, Heather Boxrud, who will go into more detail for you. Thank you.
Morning. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. All right, and you can see my screen in presentation mode. Yes? Okay, great. Okay, good morning, Mayor Elliott, members of council and members of the community. My name is Heather Boxrud, Chief Financial Officer here at the District of Squamish. All right, so we have 3 objectives of today's workshop, which are to endorse the proposed 2022 to 2026 budget workshop timeline, to endorse the proposed financial planning process improvements, and then receive for information the factors that will impact the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. We have a lot to cover this morning, so this morning's workshop agenda is to review and touch on the following salient points from the council package. So including highlighting the guiding principles outlined in the long-term financial plan, guiding principles and financial plan policy, highlighting the financial plan drivers for the 2022 to 2026 financial plan, discussing the improvements staff are recommending for the financial plan process, review the proposed budget workshop schedule, and then finally, Christina Moore, Director of Communications, and Sam Fordham, Public Engagement Specialist, will be taking us through the proposed public engagement plan. So as outlined in the long-term financial plan, guiding principles, and financial plan policy, 4 key principal categories were developed to guide management and council in the financial planning process. They are to be stable and sufficient, so taxes that do not fluctuate greatly from year to year, and revenues are sufficient to support long-term goals for the community. Sustainable and equitable, so investment is sufficient to sustain the desired service levels indefinitely. Everyone pays an equitable amount for the services they receive, and that cost recovery model is equitable. Prudent and flexible, so financial decisions aim to minimize risk. Financial decisions ensure future flexibility to adapt opportunities and or changing circumstances. And that it be efficient and measurable, so services are provided in an efficient manner, and successes are measured using indicators or benchmarks. So the primary priorities that are driving the projects and capital being proposed in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan are the pillars of the strategic plan, which, as a reminder for public, is the planet and our environment. So namely efforts around the climate emergency declaration, climate adaptation and mitigation projects, housing affordability and diversity, the economy and local jobs, neighborhood connectivity, and public spaces. The district has also developed an organizational plan to help guide the organization in the budgeting process. The 4 pillars of the organizational plan are people, effective service, stewardship, and building bridges. So the district has invested significantly in developing master plans to guide work over the coming decades. There are several master plans that guide capital investments and projects. A key focal point in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan is the next implementation phase of the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan, which was endorsed by Council in 2019 under the guidance of the Real Estate and Facilities Strategy. A copy of the master plan and current status of projects is posted on the district's website. And finally, priority is given to projects and services to alleviate or mitigate areas that contain legislative impacts, health and safety concerns, or a high degree of financial risk. So in terms of improvements, several improvements to the financial planning process are being targeted during the 2022 to 2026 financial plan rollout. The first improvement goal is to have the financial plan through 3 readings and adoption by the end of December. So the primary benefit to a December adoption is the ability for the district to compete RFPs in market in the first quarter. This will put the district at a significantly better competitive position to compete project contracts early in the year, when the majority of competing organizations are also in market, rather than historically being in market after the first wave of RFPs have been tendered. A second benefit is that the district will be able to commence projects in the first quarter, allowing for full fiscal to execute on the budget, rather than historically only having 3 quarters from adoption of the budget to the end of the fiscal. This will minimize incomplete projects at the end of the year. Staff are proposing a budget workshop schedule that will accommodate a December adoption. So to note, the schedule does not reduce the quantity of budget workshops. Rather, staff have made budget administration improvements to make the process more efficient, flexible, and adaptable, so less time is required between meetings. As well, staff are recommending a scheduled first quarter budget amendment that will accommodate the need for carry forwards based on actual budget amount required once the year-end process is complete. This is a common process amongst local governments that will eliminate the difficult task of estimating budget requirements on carry forward projects in the 3rd quarter during the budgeting process. The first quarter amendment will also align with BC Assessment's non-market change results, so providing council with the opportunity to make adjustments to the budget should the non-market change be significantly different from what is forecasted during the budget process. However, with improved BC Assessment's reporting, this variance is not anticipated. So although the district has historically created a 5-year financial plan as a requirement of the community charter, much of the focus on planning process has been on the immediate impacts and less on years 2 to 5 and beyond. Shifting to long-range views are becoming more prevalent in local government planning process and takes time and requires staff to improve the tools and resources to enable this shift. There are several benefits to the long-term financial planning. Overall, the further out the district can accurately predict revenue and expenditure requirements, the stronger the ability to ensure the sustainable use of resources and provide stability to the organization and the community. So long-term planning allows for staff and council to focus on the shift year over year, rather than rebuilding the financial plan from the ground up annually, making the planning process a more effective use of limited time. Longer term planning also creates a proactive environment that allows space and time to adapt to unforeseen external pressures. And finally, long-term planning improves alignment between financial capacity and long-term strategic and service objectives. So staff are recommending several tactics that will support the district in improved focus on the long-term strategic planning. Firstly, staff are recommending adding the tax percentage increase and debt capacity impacts for each year across the 5-year plan. This will provide staff, council, and the public with a better gauge of impacts to the taxpayer for the full 5 years of the plan. In the spring of 2021, staff developed a 10-year capital planning model. This dynamic model will become a key planning tool to accompany the budget book. The 10-year capital model provides a holistic list of capital projects, which is informed by the district's various master plans, and provides the project's funding mechanism, tax impacts, debt impacts, and asset disposition requirements over 10 years. Staff are recommending the addition of debt and reserve continuity schedules to the budget book. These schedules will list opening balance, contributions, uses, and closing balances of the reserve and debt funding requirements. In the fall of 2020, Council endorsed a general reserve bylaw to establish a general reserve. The intention of the general reserve is to move working capital funds out of the unappropriated accumulated surplus to provide greater transparency with the accompaniment of a supporting continuity schedule. The general reserve aims to minimize risk and uncertainty by establishing baseline levels for emergencies, internal borrowing requirements for debt-funded projects, tax stabilization for special operating projects and tax-funded capital projects, human resources, and legal contingencies. The policy and bylaw will provide parameters for the use and payback requirements, contributions, and thresholds. The general reserve policy and supporting analysis will be presented to Council for endorsement at the end of the financial planning process and during the year-end process. Finally, staff are recommending a review of all reserve policies and bylaws to ensure relevancy and incorporate any information that might be necessary. So in conjunction with long-term planning focus, decision-making will benefit from improved financial metrics, improved format of current budget schedules, and the addition of new schedules. The goal here is to improve transparency, clarity, and insight to support decision-making. Some recommendations to achieve this goal are the aforementioned 5-year financial metrics and the 10-year capital planning. As well, several budget schedules could benefit from redesign, including but not limited to supporting schedule views to categorize projects by funding source, highlighting grant-funded projects, highlighting growth versus inflationary projects, and highlighting the real estate and facilities master plan projects and its funding impacts. In the current financial plan process, carry forward types are not classified based on the type of carry forwards they are. So 3 main categories of carry forwards exist, which are delayed projects, multi-phased, or also known as fiscally spanned projects, and placeholder carry forwards. The result is that all carry forwards are reported on as though they are delayed projects and contribute against the overall % of completion performance metric. Staff are therefore recommending that the carry forwards are reported on by category in order to accurately and fairly report on the project completion performance. And finally, staff are recommending the inclusion of a budget best practice reference guide to be added to the budget book to guide staff, council, and the public through local government budgeting process. So there are several factors that will impact the 2022 to 2026 financial plan and beyond that are worth noting. Firstly, COVID-19 continues to have impacts on staff across several departments, including but not limited to recreation facilities and transit through decreased ridership and heightened restrictions. In spring of 2021, the district was informed that the Community Works Fund would be coming to an end in 2023, and all monies needed to be spent, otherwise they must be returned. The 2021 closing balance of the reserve is estimated to be approximately $3.25 million. To note, the Community Works Fund has historically funded actor transportation, transit systems improvements, and small qualified projects that would be otherwise funded by tax. Since being informed of the program termination, staff have been diligently reviewing and advancing projects budgeted from beyond 2023, which was slated for the Community Works Fund funding. The projects recommended for Community Works funding will be outlined in the supporting Community Works Fund reserve continuity schedule. District staff are currently working with Urban Systems to update the district's asset management plan, which was developed in 2010. The plan informs the financial planning process as it outlines the construction, operation, maintenance, renewal, replacement, expansion, and disposal of infrastructure assets, while minimizing risk and the cost to the taxpayer. The Public Sector Accounting Standards Board approved PS 3280 asset retirement obligation in March 2018, with the new standard coming into effect and must be implemented for the 2022 fiscal year end. The standard defines asset retirement obligation as the legal obligation associated with the retirement of tangible capital assets and addresses specific guidance to retire certain tangible capital assets at the end of their useful life, including activities ranging from removal of asbestos to the retirement of landfills. Staff are currently working with Urban Systems in conjunction with the Asset Management Plan project, and a detailed briefing to Council is forthcoming, including the evaluation method used, the transitional provision option chosen, and the financial impacts resulting from the standard. Finally, in 2018, the Real Estate and Facilities Strategy identified that the district's facilities had reached a critical state, with 75% of the district's facilities at 25 years or older. Continued significant investment in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan will be required if the district is to advance into the next phase of the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan. So in terms of workshop schedule, staff are recommending the following stages. The dates of the council workshops are in the package. So September is to include the kickoff, which is this meeting, utilities and SLRD, and the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan Part 1 discussion. October is a big month with a workshop almost every week and will include the General Fund Operations discussion, the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan Part 2 discussion, special operating projects, real estate and facilities community touchpoint discussion, and a capital rollout. Then November will include the wrap-up meeting before the financial plan public info, and then a review of the public info feedback workshop. And finally, December will have a meeting for 3 readings and 1 for adoption to the financial plan. So I will now take a quick break or some time to turn it over to council for questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Boxrud. I'll turn it over to Councilor Reese.
Thank you. So with respect to the non-market change, if I understand the process you're proposing, we would have adopted our financial plan by the end of December. So we've gone through the 3 readings and adoption. And then the non-market change final numbers don't come out until, my recollection from last year was about March. And so I think if I understood the presentation correctly, what we're proposing is that if we have to make a change, or for any reason for that matter, in the financial plan after adoption, we would do it by an amendment to the financial plan. And I guess I'm wondering about the circumstances. I know we try to pre-estimate the change, the non-market change, before we sort of get too far into the final steps of the budget. But last year, for example, through an error at BC assessment, all of a sudden we ended up with an extra 3% change. And so the change was 6% instead of about 3%. So when I'll just speak for myself here, when I'm going through the budget process and we're making decisions on increasing or decreasing spending, it's one thing to end up with our requisition, or our expenditures rather, will increase by say 5%. And I think individually we all have a sort of a personal tolerance for that, how far we would want to increase spending in any given year. But the other thing that's in the back of my mind, and I think probably other councils as well, is what's the actual impact to the taxpayer if we say 5%, but then we end up with 3% non-market growth. So that comes to net 2%, which makes everybody even more comfortable. But also it's been an opportunity in years past to also increase the spending, to add in projects that were maybe just on the borderline of a decision for yes or no. And so I'm wondering about the opportunity for that. And the other, I guess, possibility is that something would come back which actually reduces the amount of change we're contemplating. And we find that out in February or March. And then we want to either raise taxes more than we would like to, or we would have to come back into the budget and take some things out. And so I can appreciate the need or the desire to have the ability to, as you say, use the whole fiscal year for projects. The other tool we've used in the past is moving early release of funds for some major projects. And so I'm trying to balance those two sort of scenarios in my mind. It's easier to not maybe go the final adoption of the financial plan until, say, March. Get all the first 3 readings done by the end of December, and then have an opening if we have to change it or wish to even add something to the budget because of the impact of the non-market growth. Or is it easier just to adopt and then wait and see, and if we have to change, we go through the process of amending the financial plan? And I'm just trying to balance those two, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. Through the mayor, thank you for that question. So what staff are recommending is a scheduled first quarter amendment that does achieve both the objective of being able to move on the financial plan, get the RFPs into market and to compete early on, as well as have that opportunity to get an accurate estimate on carry forwards. So even if the non-market change didn't make any variance, we would still be having this budget amendment. The budget amendment is also the opportunity to add or reduce projects based on the non-market change result. And so it is a really elegant way that local governments have now figured out how they can do both. Which is why we're recommending doing this as well. The other thing is BC Assessments has come out that they're doing better data capture, earlier reporting, better variance reporting. The significant increase that occurred in last year was due to a change in ownership of a significant property. So something that is not normal and likely won't occur again in the near future. So that again is, the reason for the variance, but this budget amendment allows for exactly what you're saying is, reducing or adding projects as a response to the non-market change.
So if I understand it, then that budget amendment is going to happen regardless.
That's correct.
And what is there another purpose to it?
It's for the carry forwards, because we would have to be.
Oh, I see.
We have to add the carry forwards in. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I have another question later, but I'll stand aside for a minute.
Council Pender.
Thank you. A couple questions. The one, we're redoing some fire halls, a public works yard, some really necessary infrastructure, and that's looks like going to have some impact on our budgets and our debt ratios and so on. And from the conversations, it seems there's two perspectives. The one is that for these sorts of projects, you should lean heavily on debt, with the idea being it's going to serve the community for many years going forward, and so debt allows, as time goes forward, people who are living here at that time to pay through the debt, is my understanding. And the other, I guess, perspective is with this sort of thing, you do asset management, you have well built up reserves, and you need to replace your fire hall, the money's already there. I gather that we're looking at some sort of hybrid between those two approaches going forward, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to if that's correct, or sort of how we're looking at these sorts of things in the future. So when we have to replace these fire halls again, what sort of planning are we doing now around that kind of thing?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Great question. So, it is the long-term focus is exactly that. It's the asset management that goes 20 years. We have the long-term capital. We're always balancing the, pay as you go, so to speak, versus the debt, being the debt or borrowing side of things being the more advantageous route of funding, for exactly as you mentioned, that you're spreading the cost over the time period. The district is getting into a really good position in terms of reserves. Obviously, we're not there yet. We're at a crunch time where we've got some critical facilities that need to be replaced. But the goal certainly is, with that long-term view, is to build up reserves for and to anticipate some of these replacements, so we don't have to just rely on debt, or you don't get into a point where you have no other options. So that is the art of long-term planning, essentially.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, in the principles, one of them mentioned was equity, or used the word equitable, I think, and it was in the context of pay for what you use. And I just wanted to dig into that a little bit because I think we've seen that COVID has impacted different people significantly in different ways. And some people have done very, very well, and other people are really, really struggling. And so I'm wondering where in our philosophy, or if there's a place for it, and maybe this is more of a question for council, but the idea that this is an opportunity for our community, which overall is, I think, doing fairly well. We're seeing lots of growth and lots of people want to be here. Is this our opportunity to do a little bit more to help those that aren't doing as well? And maybe is that the lens we should be thinking about with equity?
Through the chair, I do think that's probably a council discussion and less of a financial discussion. So I open it up to council if that's the direction and will of council to pursue.
Ms. Boxrud, the equity piece is captured in our financial principles, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So if council wanted to review the financial principles that have been in place since 2011, that would be council. I've got one before I come back to you, Council Race. So following up on Council Race's question, I'm certainly supportive of having the scheduled budget amendment for carry forwards and any adjustments. The tricky part, I think, is that we would have to identify for council which projects would not go to RFP in the first quarter because they might be subject to a change of mind if the non-market growth was smaller than predicted. Because if we action them and send them out to RFP and then go, oh, actually, we don't want to spend that much, it's too late. So how do we get around that?
That's through you, Chair or Mayor. That's a very good point, and I think we'll have to incorporate that into the budgeting process, that we prioritize some elements which will be probably more competitive in the marketplace versus, and which ones we would have an appetite, or council would have an appetite to cut should the not in market change not come in as planned. Again, not likely that we'd have a significant variance. It was a one-off, so not a huge risk, but certainly something absolutely to take note of.
Councilor Rice.
Thank you. And just back on that point again after the mayor's comment, because I was thinking about how this would actually work, and in my experience where we have wanted to get the project going quickly, and we've given an early release of funds direction. Those have been significant projects, sewer line or something like that, where there's quite a complicated bidding process, and those are probably not the types of projects that I can think we would backtrack on. They're typically funded by debt or reserves. It's more like the special projects and the kind of everybody's wish list type of projects that are relatively small, and probably aren't as complicated to execute. So I think that probably could work. But I was, in trying to think back through a budget process, and it's almost like we would have a parking lot for some projects that if there was a change, even if it's a notional parking lot, that we could change and either add in or take out of the budget, depending on the impact of the non-market change that we discovered later in the spring. So it's just, I don't know, it's more of for me, it was more of just how would the mechanics actually go. I wasn't thinking of the big projects, one where the competitive bidding and so forth is really quite important, because those are typically, once we say go for those, they're going. So that wouldn't be it. The other point that I had, though, was my favorite topic, which is now called general reserve. It used to be called accumulated surplus. And I noted in the report talking about unappropriated accumulated surplus, or that portion of it. And I can recall the discussion we had earlier in the year about things that fund or those monies would be used for. Basically, I'll just lump it all together into working capital. and things of that nature. And I certainly agree with that. I wasn't trying to spend it all. My concern has always been, that there's money that is unallocated and just might sit there. And so I'm just trying to sort of see, and maybe this isn't the discussion we're going to have about it because you talked about it sort of in the future discussion, but even this year, as we go into the budget, I would expect staff to sort of look at the punitive surplus general reserve and say we need this much for working capital. Fair enough. Is there any money there that might not be allocated either this year or even in a future year if we identified some monies we wanted to add into the financial plan as a source of funding for a project 2 years away or something like that? Is there any money there that is just completely unallocated? Those are the monies that concern me because we have taxed for them. And so to try to get the benefits somehow into the community. And so if staff have any thoughts about identifying those at the start of the budget process, or how we might, as we go through this, be able to deal with those funds. It's up until now, it's been on a bit of an ad hoc basis.
Ms. Boxrud, there's a number of items having to do with reserves under the long-term planning focus. So I don't want to get down into the details, but perhaps you could reference those.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand what your question was, Mary
Well, I
Elliott.
don't want to get down into the details of reserves at this meeting.
Okay.
This is the overview, but you have put a number of items related to long-term planning goals about reserves in your staff report. So perhaps you could touch on Councillor Race's points through those actions that are upcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, the aim, and as mentioned, the analysis is forthcoming in terms of what portion of the general reserve will come into, what portion of the unappropriated accumulated surplus will come into the general reserve, and there's quite a bit of work behind that. So we will be bringing that forward. Just in terms of the reserves in general, we do want to take the opportunity to look at all of the reserve policies, and just for relevancy, to ensure they're current, to see if there's anything that should be adjusted. So that's another big piece of the reserves that we will be looking at. But yes, the general reserve piece of it is really around providing that transparency and around having that taxation stabilization mechanism that we just didn't have that insight into the financial statements in the past because we had internal borrowing going against that, and in terms of working capital cash flow management. But we do have that now with UBW platform. But a good body of work needs to occur in order to achieve that analysis and recommendation.
If there are no other questions on this portion, I think we should move on to the next piece.
Great. I will need to be able to share my screen again. Great. We can see my screen again.
It's just coming up now. You can see it.
Excellent. All right. So we're just looking for the resolution to endorse the proposed 2022-2020, or sorry, the objectives, and we can move on to the public engagement.
Our agenda has just the first line as the motion. Do you want a motion that includes all three?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. There it is. The rest of it's there. Does someone want to move that? Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor French. Any further discussion? I think this certainly is a really good step in the right direction in terms of increasing transparency, providing more tools to council with which to make their decisions. And given the underinvestment in our built infrastructure, and I mean buildings, I think we've done a great job over the years of building up our reserves for utilities. I think having that extra layer of transparency about what it is going to do to our budget over the coming years when we build 2 fire halls, public works yard, look at municipal hall and revitalizing Brennan Park. I think it'll be helpful with what you've proposed here for the community to see how we maintain the service level we currently provide, but what that's going to do to our budget. I think the nod to long-term planning is essential. I think we find ourselves in this position because we weren't planning on the replacement of our buildings. So we have some catching up to do, which I think is going to be hard, but is certainly necessary when you think about the core services we need to deliver to this community. So I'm looking forward to seeing the new schedules and seeing some of the new tools. Thanks for your work on this. Any other comments? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so I will now pass the presentation over to Christina Moore, Director of Communications, and Sam Fordham, Public Engagement Specialist, to review the 2022 to 2026 Financial Plan, Public Engagement Plan.
Good morning, Council. Thank you, Heather.
You've lost your audio, Ms. Moore.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Council. I'm Christina Moore, Director of Communications for the District of Squamish, and today I will take you through our plan to engage the community in the process towards adoption of the 5-year financial plan. I will be joined by Samuel Fordham, our Public Engagement Specialist, who will take you through a few of the slides today. We have 10 slides in the presentation. Perhaps we save questions and discussion for the end, but I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions, of course, as we go through. Next slide, please, Heather. So the public engagement will take place at the inform consult level on the IAP2 spectrum, which is the International Association for Public Participation spectrum that we follow. Budget information will be shared online for the community to review and provide comment on. We will have printed information packages for anyone available, anyone who requires it. And one of the primary goals of the engagement campaign is to really provide helpful information for residents to understand the budget, understand the district's 5-year priorities, and what is driving the tax impact over the 5 years. The budget is complex and extensive, and our efforts will be aimed at providing digestible information to the community in a variety of ways. Depending on the level of detail that they require. Some people really just want a snapshot, others want to dig deep and understand and look at the documents that Council is looking at as well. So the full budget spreadsheets will always be available. Those are the spreadsheets that Council reviews and goes into great detail in terms of the funding mechanisms for each project and the timing over the 5-year financial plan. Other ways that we will share the budget is in more of an easier to digest format that helps the community get more of a snapshot of what is being proposed and what is driving those tax impacts. And the second goal, of course, is to receive feedback from the community to inform Council's decision-making as you move towards adoption of the 5-year plan. And there are a variety of ways that we are proposing to receive this feedback. We're excited to announce that this year's budget information and dialogue will be launched via the district's new public engagement platform, which will provide opportunities for the public to view materials, engage in discussion forums, provide comments, and seek answers to questions. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Sam in a few minutes to talk to you about that new public engagement platform. I'll just take you through a little bit of the high level timeline before I do that. So we are aiming to launch our new platform the week of September 27th, which is next week. It's a little bit aggressive. We have just signed an RFP for this, this platform that has been ongoing over the summer, but we're really excited to launch the platform, test the platform, and get the community on there and working with the tools and use this for our financial plan dialogue. So aiming for next week to launch all of that. Looking ahead to October 5th, we will be launching our online tool, which we have used for the last few years, which allows the public to click around the various aspects of the budget, learn about the projects that are being proposed, view the dollar amounts in year 1 through year 5, and understand a little bit more at their leisure in terms of what is comprised of the budget. We have a couple of public information opportunities that we're proposing. The first would be kind of a mid-process check-in in the middle of October, and specifically around some of the facilities conversations and decisions that are being made. Ms. Boxrud spoke about the real estate and facilities master plan, as did Mayor Elliott. And so this is a big part of the budget that we want to ensure that the community has lots of opportunity to ask questions and learn about what is being proposed. And then looking ahead to the end of the process at November, at the end of November, November 23rd, we have scheduled the public information meeting that is typically held at the end of the process once council has had a chance to review the draft financial plan. Both open houses are intended to be a hybrid of virtual and in-person opportunities, and that will depend on COVID restrictions at the time, but that is what we are aiming for. And next slide, please. I'll now pass the presentation over to Sam Fordham to share with you some details about our new platform.
Good morning, Council. My name is Sam Fordham, Public Engagement Specialist with the district. And we're really excited about having adopted this new engagement platform, and we're calling it Let's Talk Squamish. This was a name that we decided upon after a lot of internal review with staff, and we did.
Mr. Fordham, we're just having trouble hearing you.
Oh, okay.
I don't know whether you need to be closer to your microphone or it just sounds a little bit.
Is that any better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, I will sit closer. So I'll start again. We're really excited to have adopted this new online engagement platform, and we're calling it Let's Talk Squamish. And this is a name that came after a lot of internal review with staff, but we think it conveys a casual and welcoming and open approach to dialogue with residents. This platform is widely used by municipalities across BC to encourage listening, hear different perspectives, and have conversations that highlight the differences of opinion that might exist within our community. So we're really excited to now have the resources to be able to launch and manage this new tool. It's going to serve as an online hub for all district engagement projects, and you can see an example here of Cambios using it. It has a variety of tools that allow us to collect feedback, ask questions, and share ideas and stories about specific projects with Squamish residents. And we have a lot of great examples to borrow from. There's a lot of other communities that are using this platform, and we're really going to be learning what works best as we go for Squamish and for the residents here. Choosing this platform, as Christina mentioned, was sort of the result of an RFP that's been open during the summer, and now we're really focusing on launching this this fall in support of a few engagement efforts with the budget being one of those. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview sort of how the platform looks and works. Each project and the budget specifically will have its own project page. And that project page will be sort of the home of all budget engagement information online. It will include budget details, important dates, project timelines, contact details, that type of thing. It'll also have important engagement events and registration information that's really easy for people to find and access. And then it can also link to other budget engagement tools such as podcasts and things like that that we might have information for online. Next slide, please. So all that information is really easily accessible, but what's really exciting is the opportunity for people to actually participate on the platform. So as Christina mentioned, the budget engagement this year is really focused on an inform and consult level objective. But we want to make sure that people have information about the budget, how it's developed, and that type of thing. And part of that is providing an opportunity for people to ask us questions. So there's lots of question and answer functionality on the platform, as well as an opportunity to provide, to ask really focused questions on specific topics. So that's certainly something we're going to be looking at rolling out as well as part of this. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So jumping back into the budget specifically, and that last slide that Sam showed was another community. It's not our page just yet. We are busy building that page this week. So a variety of budget documents and promotions are being planned and developed at the moment. We are developing a series of explainers to convey information to the community in a graphic, rich, digestible format. One of the examples of these is the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan projects to help provide the community with the information that they need to understand the decision-making in front of council. Infographics have proven to be a great way to provide a snapshot of projects to create interest and information and spark conversation. And these tend to be shared on social media and questions and comments often get posted as a result of those posts. Just a little bit of a list here in terms of some of the tactics that we will deploy. Of course, social media is a great tool to reach a lot of people. We also have a weekly newspaper ad. We will do some digital online advertising as well as our own e-newsletter to raise awareness and drive people to the Let's Talk Squamish platform. We're also planning a podcast to dive deeper on some of the key aspects of the budget. And then the online budget tool that I spoke about earlier that allows people to click through the budget in an easy way. We typically create budget boards to bring the budget to life for members of the public who may not be online. That typically gets done toward the end of the process when council is a little further along in the deliberations, and it will be they will be presented in advance of the public information meetings, or I should say public information meeting on November 23rd. Next slide, please. There are a few opportunities for council interaction, and some of this as well is certainly dependent on your own level of engagement on your own pages and communication channels as well. But we will have 2 mayor's drop-ins scheduled during the months of the budget process in October and November. Coffee with Council, I'll come back to in a moment. I'll just come back to that once I finish the list here, because we'd like to get a little bit of your feedback on this as it relates to some of the COVID restrictions. As I mentioned, we will share lots of social media posts and links to the Let's Talk Squamish. Certainly the value and the success of the Let's Talk Squamish engagement platform will be to get as much awareness of it as possible and get as many community members as possible looking at it and engaging with it. So we would like to ask council to help us in those awareness building goals and to share the posts and information that we share, which many of you do a great job of already. And there are discussion forums on Let's Talk Squamish that we aim to provide. So we certainly would invite council to participate in any of those as you see an opportunity. I mentioned a facilities information event in mid-October, and then of course the overall public information event on November 23rd. Just back to Coffee with Council, we've had a number of conversations. I've had a number of conversations with you over time as we have tested and tried the concept of the council coffee crawl. This was an event that an event series that we developed with you prior to COVID-19, and there were some great successes, and in terms of some of the venues that we chose and some of the conversations that ensued, and then there were others that didn't work quite so well. And if you recall, the goal, we held 3 events on a single day, and each of you paired up and did a morning session or an afternoon session or an evening session. And we tried to invite the community to come down at a time that was convenient to them and have a coffee with you and have some conversation. With COVID, that presents some new challenges. And it was also a little bit challenging from a logistical point, and I think from a clarity point in terms of the schedule of the 3 events, the 3 different locations. And so what we would propose over the course of the fall months for council's feedback and discussion is that we change the branding slightly from Coffee Crawl to Coffee with Council, and just host one event, perhaps weekly, perhaps every 2 weeks, and have the councillors rotate through that. So perhaps 2 councillors at a time, have a morning coffee, perhaps at 8:30 in the morning before people get too busy with their days, and choose a location that is COVID friendly, and just schedule a schedule in advance so that the public knows in advance where they can go over the course of the budget period. And some of the locations that we are thinking about are outdoor covered spaces. So there are some coffee shops that lend themselves really well to that with outdoor covered space. And so could be weather resistant even in the fall months. And then of course we have our new covered shelters, which we thought we could also take the opportunity to program with such an event. So happy to get some feedback on that. I have just a couple more slides, and then maybe we can open it up for discussion and come back to that concept and get your feedback on it. Next slide, please. I wanted to touch on media relations. We value our relationships that we have with our local media. We know that they're a really important channel for residents to be kept informed on council work and on the business of the district. And recognizing that the budget is complex and extensive, we want to ensure and take extra steps to ensure that they have the access to the information they need, and also to answer any questions that they have. They're on tight timelines, tight deadlines with their publishing schedule, and we know that Tuesday council meetings are not always well timed in that publication and that publishing process. So we'd like to propose to local reporters that we provide them with a weekly technical briefing by staff on the contents of what is contained in the report to council. This would take place on a Monday prior to council's discussion on a Tuesday. And again, it would give us an opportunity to answer any of the questions around concepts, definitions, numbers in the report to council prior to council's deliberation during the Tuesday workshop. And next slide, please. And finally, as mentioned, there are a number of ways that we will be inviting the public to provide feedback. We have a number of, we are looking forward to activating Let's Talk Squamish to receive public feedback and discussion and create dialogue on that platform. There will continue to be a way to send email to budgetfeedback@squamish.ca. And we hope that there will be opportunities through the mayor's drop-in or coffee with council if people are able to make if people are able to take the opportunity to join you at some of those events, and then the public information event as well. And that is the end of my slides. I'd like to turn it over to council now for any questions and discussion you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Thank you, Mr. Fordham. Questions? Councilor Race.
Thank you. How are you planning on having the public information meetings? Is that virtual or actually in person or some combination?
Our hope is to deliver, through the chair, our hope is to deliver a hybrid event. We are looking at ways, and we have in fact, Mr. Fordham has participated in organizing a hybrid event at his previous job before joining the district this spring. And so we think there are ways to take advantage of what we have found as great improvements on the, on getting more people involved during the virtual events, but also bringing back in a bit of an in-person component. This really depends on where things are at with COVID in November. There are, guidelines, of course, from public health that provides us with guidelines on gatherings and events. And so our goal would be to present those opportunities in a way that is safe and that participants, including council, are comfortable.
And the second question is with respect to the coffee crawl, or maybe it's more of a comment really. Speaking for myself, I don't mind going and doing that. Over the past couple of years that we've had these, the attendance, if we get 2 or 3 people there, for me it's been a big deal. We just don't seem to attract the numbers. And perhaps that is the problem with having 2 or 3 different events the same day or fairly close. So if you modify it somehow so that there is some certainty in the community and maybe just only one option that particular day or something like that, and I think that might be helpful. It is, and we've had interesting conversations, there's no question, but there's just very few people that seem to be able to go through these things, at least in my experience, at a given time. So it's not really a mass appeal event like some of the other possibilities. Thank you.
Councilor Herford.
Thank you. On the coffee with council points, I like the idea of having a more focused, where we'll have one event per day. But had you landed on the time slot for that? Is that early morning that you mentioned? Is that the time slot we're going with, or is this sort of the opening point of discussing that? I'm just curious which one's going to be best attended of those.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, the timeframe, we haven't finalized a timeframe. We're definitely open to feedback. When we look at past events, we have had some good luck in a morning timeframe. We're always trying to balance, especially when we choose one event, we're always trying to find that optimal time that reaches the most people. And I think part of what we would look for with these coffee events would be to balance some of the other opportunities. So the information evenings, the information meetings tend to be in the evening. The mayor's drop-in is on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. And so balancing those events with an early morning coffee might be a useful balance. Having said that, if we were to put out a schedule, say we put out a 6-week schedule in advance, and each councillor chose to attend 2 of them, we could have different times identified over the course of the 6 weeks to try to achieve a greater reach. I think part of what we would hope to do is, and to Councillor Race's point in terms of attendance, is really push that by pre-promoting and raising awareness in advance, we would try to increase attendance and interest. Oh, I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I think we are open to feedback.
Yeah,
on that.
thank you. It gets you partway there. I think I'm hoping that with the focus of an hour or 2 event or whatever the time frame is, versus sort of the events running back to back over whatever a 12-hour period throughout the day, might allow us to have some staff support with that to help explain to the public what's happening. And as a couple councillors are sitting there talking to someone having a coffee, it's a very casual environment, but it also might look like 4 or 5 people just sitting there having a coffee, and sort of helping facilitate some of those conversations, I think would be helpful. And I think I've done at least 1 event, if not 2, without signage. So I think there's room for improvement in the at the venue and the running of that, and efficiency sort of everyone's time and efforts in that 2-hour window to, I think some conversations have sort of passed, opportunities for conversation have passed us by with those sort of factors at sort of during event. So that's something I would be looking to see, regardless of time frame that these events would happen.
Thank you. That's great feedback. And I think those are all problems that we can overcome and improve upon.
And just for clarity, Mayor's drop-in, we're probably doing it over the lunch hour now or in the evening because working people can't make Wednesday at 11. Ever. So we're playing around with my schedule to make sure that it's more accessible as well. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Christina Moore, in an early slide in your presentation highlighted, I'll just quote my notes here, District 5-year priorities and what's driving the tax impact. And then following that, receive feedback for council decision making. So the 5-year priorities and what's driving tax impact, of course, that's of general interest and we're obliged to present that. And that is, these are bigger picture, bigger pictures to present. However, in my own experience at meetings, for example, with the public, that we've used the Ledge as a venue, other venues, many people come out with questions specifically concerning special projects or capital projects. I'll give a couple of examples. As a capital project, pickleball court facility improvements, or as a special project, navigation channel dredging study. So many people come out with these specific types of interests, and so this is another level of interest. And what I end up doing is taking them over to the boards where, as you have indicated, we do provide the full spreadsheets. They're always available for consultation for members of the public. But perhaps that we can be prepared in other ways for addressing questions and delivering information about those line items. And I just will pass on just a notion. Perhaps we can break them out under special projects, under capital projects, respectively, by the department that is overseeing them. And we do in our spreadsheets have not only departments, but individual staff members associated with projects. But it may be easier for the public to gain a picture and for us to relate what we're doing beyond that big picture 5-year priority and what's driving tax impacts by presenting those line items department by department in a different way, so that I can take a member of the public over to a board this is what engineering is up to, and here's a couple of staff members that may be able to address this, but some way to make those long lists and 3 or 4 boards of line items a little bit less daunting and a little bit more user-friendly for the public, because generally I can bring them over to a specific item, but they do need some orientation to get there. So my suggestion is we give some attention to those specific capital project questions that are going to come up, and maybe offer a different overview for that category of budget item. Just a thought, a comment. Thank you.
Councilor French.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll offer some of my own thoughts on the coffee with council and share that one of the best attended events that I participated in was with Councillor Pettingill at one of the cideries in the business park. From the perspective of numbers of people, there were quite a few that attended, and all those who attended engaged us above and beyond the time frame with excellent conversation. So I would like for us to, at minimum, consider keeping at least one event in that type of licensed venue. I think that we definitely potentially hit a demographic in that type of location that we might not otherwise reach. Early morning before 8:45 is best for me, and then in the evenings, just in my own schedule. And I'm happy to hear that we're contemplating the use of the new covered shelters. I think that this type of public engagement is perfect for those venues in light of our current COVID-19 reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fordham, can I just ask some questions about the Let's Talk Squamish? I saw on one of the slides that people have to sign in. So how is this different from, like, say, just commenting on Facebook? What's the difference between the Let's Talk platform and social media?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair. So registration, I guess I'll start with is optional on all of the tools, and we can decide whether we want it on or off, depending on the project or depending on the information that we're looking for. Generally, best practice, according to the team we're working with over at Bang the Table, who's the software provider, is to have it on in most cases. That helps to ensure that people do actually live in our community. But it also just helps when people have to have a name and be registered. It helps to keep the conversations respectful. What I would say the big difference between social media and this platform is that there is moderation. So any language or comments that don't fit within our terms of use simply won't be posted on the platform. So it really keeps the conversations respectful and appropriate, and sort of working towards a useful information to help us with the decision making rather than anything else. So I think that would be the big difference.
And then to follow up on that, one of the things that we were using in some of our engagement related to developments was that you could see other people's questions and see the answers, and those are always there. Is how do people see what's been said in the Let's Talk app?
Yeah, so great question. There's a bunch of different, or I think there's 8 different tools that we use, and they vary from open environments to a mixed environment to a closed environment. And really what those mean is that open environments sort of show the history of conversations, what's been asked, ideas that people have, stories that people have shared, and all of those can be open to everybody to comment on, vote. There's a bunch of different options, but in those environments, that information will be really public for everybody to see. Whereas there's other closed environments, such as a survey, for example, where we can ask a set of questions and people can answer, and that information will be private. So it really depends on what we're trying to achieve for the specific project we're working on. But there's a mixture of open and closed tools we can use to show that history.
Thank you. And what are some of the benefits? I know Kamloops is using this tool, Souk is using this tool. What are some of the benefits you've heard from these municipalities?
I think it's just really the ease of use to get information in front of people and start collecting feedback. The platforms are very intuitive and very user friendly, and it's a really easy way to share information and have conversations with people. So that's really the big benefit that in the conversation that I had, I did speak with Souk, and that I've had with them is just the ease of use to really get this information in front of people and collect feedback that is really useful. In a really easy way. So that's the biggest benefit.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Pagano.
Maybe just a comment, actually. I'm open to trying more attempts at the coffee with the council. I have enjoyed all of them. Some were poorly, had poor turnout, and some had amazing turnout. And so it was very hit and miss. But if we can continue that, I think it's worthwhile to keep trying it. There's nothing wrong with going out and having a coffee, even if it's just with one or two people. It's good anyways. But just as we're talking, I've been thinking over the last year or two, we've had some great conversations and presentations from staff about our climate action plan. I think there was a 3-session thing on that. The planning and building department have done a couple. One was on some of the bylaws around carbon and so on, and there's also one around the permit times, I believe. And I found those really, really good. I was mostly listening, but everyone was there. You could ask questions. You heard the staff answers. There's been a couple of other ones where staff has been at, and I think other people just sort of out in the community were speaking. And I guess, budgets, I think, are intimidating for a lot of people, and you're very focused on the what. Should we spend this amount of money on this thing? But if you don't really fully understand the why, it's maybe hard to have a constructive argument about, is this the right focus for the money? And so where I'm going with this is I wonder if there's an opportunity for some more of those sort of informative discussions, which might not be directly related to specific budget items, but if some of those conversations would be helpful in this, because I find that people are really curious. They ask great questions. There's really informative answers that I find useful. And I feel like people come away from those sort of understanding, oh, now I understand a bit more why the district is doing the things they're doing. And then also, as I listen to the questions, it gives me a sense of where the priorities are. So even if we're not talking about specific dollar amounts or line items, I'm getting a gauge on where people's heads are at. And so I found those to be really productive conversations. And I just wonder if there's some room for some of that sort of thing as we move forward.
Councilor Pettengill, do you have an example of something?
Well, I just, like, even the conversations about the climate action plan or the permit time processing, just hearing the questions and the responses and the reactions to those staff responses gave me a sense of where people were in the priority of what they wanted to see happen, what sort of resources I felt they were willing to put into these sorts of things. And we could be a bit more explicit in terms of talking about dollar amounts, I suppose. But so, for example, going forward, maybe there's some conversations to be had about growth or density or some of these things that there's a lot of conversation about, and I think they do impact, fire halls and public works yard, and I need to spend this sorts of money, and why we're sort of designing them the way we are, and why we've talked about bulking up the lower floor of the Pensions Hall, and that'll come into a budget impact. So just some of these broader discussions, I'm wondering if there's some value, if that will bring people in that would otherwise be scared of a budget conversation. Would they be more interested in having a conversation about fire halls and how community grows? And that's
Is that more clear, Ms. Moore?
Yeah, through the chair, to address Councillor Pettingill's comments there, I think we are planning to do a second event, a second public information night this year. in specifically in focusing on the real estate and facilities master plan. I think that will lend itself more to some of the examples that Councillor Pettingill is speaking of in terms of the climate series and some of the workshops that planning has run with the public. And you know, there are opportunities there to expand on the subject matter as well. If other questions come up, we can ensure that there are, you know, enough subject matter experts in the room to answer other broader questions on the budget as well. So we could take that opportunity to invite the public in, you know, 2 or 3 weeks after the process has begun, to ask those questions and get more information. So we'll take that feedback and look at that event and see how it can meet all those goals.
Just building off of Councillor Pettingill's comments, though, there have been a number of podcasts about growth, things about the climate. I know Mr. Pickett's just finished a 3-part podcast series on the climate action plan. And so I just wondered to get at sort of that high level discussion, whether through our materials and the Let's Talk program, we can direct people to those conversations. I know Mr. Gunn did a mayor's drop-in with me around the connection between growth and equity and density in neighborhoods. There's a whole series on that. So linking people to things that we are talking about at that high level, but that might not be in this budget specifically, but are certainly connected to it. And all that material already exists somewhere. So I just don't want to lose what we've done to help support these conversations.
Thank you. That's a great point.
All right, Council, anything else on the engagement around the budget? All right, not seeing anything. Looking forward to this. Thank you very much. I can't wait to see the Let's Talk application and play around with it a little bit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are to have a recess for 15 minutes. CEO, will people be ready if we come back at 5 past the hour rather than 1/4 past?
I can see if we can make that happen. I don't have the answer, but we'll reach out to the staff.
Because we're done, except for a motion to close. So
I can reach out to staff who are planning to present for the closed and see if we can start earlier. Would you? Okay. Rather than waste the time before lunch. I'll do that now on the break.
okay, so council motion to close, moved by Councilor Efford, second by Councilor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then council will recess for 15 minutes and then we'll check back in, see if we're ready to go. Thanks, everyone.